Linda.
Wearing a yes.
Okay, well, let's not refer to that because that's next week's show.
Yes, we're doing 2 weeks of shows this week, Matt. So just because
Yeah.
I'm taking off next week.
Unlike somebody who said, "Oh yeah, by the way, so and so is signing."
Kevin
the
Hayes.
deadline is
Yeah.
the deadline is August 15th, and
Thanks.
the show we were doing was August 20th.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Make me feel good. Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem. You did a great job. So the premise of today, since we already did sort of discuss the Kings, so I do want to get into the Kings in general, though, with you, Matt, for sure, because we had our own little discussion on the Kings one day. But I'd like to talk about the Kings with you. And then I also wanted to talk about my premise that I threw up as my blog, which is that there's only 8 teams in the West that can make the playoffs, and that there's no way those 8 teams in the West can't make the playoffs. So that's my theory, which are the 5, basically the 8 teams that made it last year. I don't see anybody else making the playoffs.
Well, my predictions are so phenomenal.
Yes.
Remember, I said that the San Jose would sweep the Kings.
Yeah, I do remember that, Matt.
I got close, but
I remember the 4 Sharks that I had on my fantasy hockey playoff pool that I was like celebrating, popping corks and drinking champagne when you told me that the Kings were done, and then what happened?
The Kings are never.
I don't know. We got another cup, so what do I know? It just goes to prove I know absolutely nothing.
Oof.
Go ahead.
Small plane just crashed in Buffalo Airport in the parking lot.
Oh, Jesus.
You're just full of good news, Josh, aren't you?
Josh,
I am.
Josh, you got to stop reading the news and watching Twitter.
Yeah, let's limit the commentary to hockey, unless yeah.
Right. Okay. We should be good. All right. I'm going to start. We'll go Matt, and then we'll go Josh, and then I will introduce. And then we'll go Mike, and then we'll go Josh, and then I'll introduce Matt. We'll do it that way.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, they have a top 50 list on this thing too, eh?
What?
On the Hockey News magazine.
50.
They have a top 50 players this year, or who will be top 50.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another
It's
time.
not a serious crash.
Good. It was
top 50.
It was done for comical purposes.
I moved on, by the way, Mike. I thought we were just talking hockey.
It was
just was staged as a lark. Here we go. Ready? It's the 14th of August.
Yes.
Wow.
I know that because I just paid my electric bill.
Thursday.
That's the only reason I know. All right, here we go.
Dowdy is number 2. Is it?
All right, whoa.
Hold.
Sorry, starting. Here we go. You can't take him anywhere. Hey, Hockey World. It is August 14th, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Matthew Barry in Los Angeles.
I'm Josh Rimmer, about to be fired.
No. And you're watching the Hockey BuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com, and I'm Eklund, by the way. And yes, indeed, by the way, for those of you watching at home, Julie Robenheimer did indeed do her ice bucket challenge.
Oh, I gotta watch that.
Yeah, we'll maybe look at it later. It's on Instagram. She Instagrammed that. You can't get hipper than Instagramming your ice bucket challenge, is my opinion. But that's that. So yes, it's very good. So all of my women that I sent out to do ice bucket challenge have now complied.
I was gonna record mine in 8mm act.
Yeah, Super 8. All right, so I had a Super 8 camera when I was a kid. Okay, so we are joined by Matt Barry, and Matt, it is so good to have you back.
Great being back, guys.
You were obviously in the room of hats.
Yes.
Your hat room.
Championship hats. My
championship hats.
Yeah, so
you have one of those, Mike or Josh? You have a championship hat room.
The 2012 championship hat and the 2014 championship hat. So
very nice.
Hopefully it won't be like the Flyers, and 35 years from now I'm going, I remember when we won it in 2012 and 2014.
The difference is
anything like that.
The difference is that the hat that I have, the championship hat, was a fedora, and it was eaten by moths because it's 46 years old.
And yeah. Well, we had this funny thing, Matt, that we did the other day, which was I wanted to talk to you about. We'd had everybody vote on. It basically came up. I don't know if you saw it or not. 32 teams between 1940 and now that have won the Stanley Cup. So there's more teams than that, but this is putting teams like the Kings are one team, and teams have won it multiple times are one team for that era. And surprisingly, people put the LA Kings at number 6 all time on that 32 list. I mean, there's a little bit of, okay, this is currently obviously going on right now, and it's hard to tell, but, I mean, gosh, Dean Lombardi went from 3 years ago worrying about his job every second to now talking dynasty, right?
I mean, he talked a good game, and it was an the old adage of show me the money, and he sure did. I mean, I think a lot of luck played into it, the right place, the right time. But yeah, he was probably very close to getting a pink slip, and the Kings fans going through another 5-year rebuild, and probably some stupid GM trading away Drew Doughty for some washed up goaltender.
Right. I mean, Jonathan Quick was close to getting shipped out. There was a lot of stuff that was going down back then.
Yeah, look, I mean, even during that run, Lombardi admitted that he was shopping Dustin Brown, and I think it was a wake up call to Dustin, and he certainly woke up. And I think that they always say that like in baseball, there's always one play that changes a series.
Yeah.
I think it was that one hit on the Sedin that Dustin Brown planted on the Sedin and knocked him in the next week, and we still talk about that hit.
Yeah.
And it just changed everything. I think it changed the mindset of the fans. I think it changed everybody's opinion on the bench and just gave them that little extra that kind of drove them through that series. And they were the President's Trophy winners that year. Vancouver was, and we got by them.
Yeah.
It was, St. Louis was tough, and then Phoenix. I knew we were going to beat. They didn't have the defense for us, and I knew we were, when that series started, we were going to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that was.
I was like, you can't convince me that Phoenix is going to beat us.
Right. No.
The funny thing is that if people remember the last game of that season, the Kings played in San Jose, and depending on the outcome of that game, it was you didn't know who the Kings would match up with in the first round. And I to myself, I was saying, if I'm the Kings, I want to play Vancouver. And what would have happened if they would have not played Vancouver? Would the same thing have happened? Would they have advanced as far, and would they have won the cup like they did?
Yeah.
I mean, it's again, that's hypotheticals, and I tend not to get into hypotheticals. But I was one that didn't want Vancouver because they were just rolling, and I was just like, we got no shot. I mean, I even wrote "make it painless," which people are still throwing back in my face. So it was. I think when that was truly one of the best moments I remember, because when Jarrett Stoll scored that overtime winner in Vancouver, I remember I was at a bar with a bunch of King fans, and I started crying, and they were like, "Are you crying?" And I'm like, "Yeah. I mean, we have a shot. We have a shot. We won this game. We have a shot."
I'll never forget that game too. It's so funny you say that. I had a moment with that one too. I was playing in an NHL '94 tournament at a local at the Park Casino, which is like a riverboat casino in Philadelphia, and some guys had gotten together and they had this charity tournament, and they're like, "Oh, you had a bunch of Sega games. We're going to play NHL '94." I was like, "Great!" And I was there, and I was watching. I got eliminated like right away. I got smoked by these kids in that game. I was good in my day, but Lord, my hand-eye coordination doesn't go with you. So, but then I was sitting there, and my gosh, and I was watching that game, and I remember saying to Eric, who was right next to me at the time, I'm like, you know what? The Kings are beating the Canucks. Like, that goal was you just felt that. You felt something strong there. I agree with you, Matt.
Yeah.
That was a moment. So now here we are. Now an off season that was looking. I mean, and gosh, now if they don't win the Stanley Cup, I want to play. I know you don't want to play hypotheticals. I'm going to make you play hypotheticals for a second. If they don't win the Stanley Cup, what moves would have occurred? If they lose to Chicago, is Mike Richards still there?
I think it depends on what Mike Richards does this year. I know that everybody said that Mike Richards was gone, and we sure could. The Kings certainly could have used the cap space. And even the mayor was saying, "Oh no, he's gone, he's gone, he's gone." And Lombardi had 3 sit-downs with him and said, "Look, you got to shape up, or we're going to ship you the hell out."
Yeah.
It's like you live in Manhattan Beach. You have beautiful weather, 90 degrees out there. It's gorgeous here all the time. do you really want me to ship you to a place like Edmonton or Phoenix or Vancouver?
Right.
He doesn't. I don't think he realized how great he had it here. I also think that he really didn't recover from the concussion that he sustained against Chicago in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
I think that he didn't have a fight the entire season. I think he only had a fight, maybe in the playoffs, but I think it really affected his play, and he really was a step slower. Either that, or he just was sick of being on dry island.
Yeah. I mean, there you go. That's possible. I mean, the whole thing is the thing about Mike Richards though in the playoffs though. My moment for the playoffs for this year for Mike Richards was that Anaheim overtime game in Game 1 when he makes that goal happen, right? And he doesn't just make it. I mean, he keeps it at the point. He charges down into the corner. I mean, that was vintage Mike Richards.
Look, I mean, you Flyer fans have watched him over the years, and that's the frustrating thing about Richards and Carter is that you always got them one out of every three or four games. Carter has been wonderfully consistent since he's been here. I think being rescued from purgatory in Columbus really saved him, and that was his wake up call. And I think that this is Mike Richards' wake up call because certainly a lot of contracts are going to have to be extended. You have the following year you have Alec Martinez, obviously a huge hero for the Kings. He's going to be up.
Right.
Williams will be up. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that are going to.
Jared Stoll's up too, right? So.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because they talked about for a long time Lyndon Vey being the successor, and they shipped him off to Vancouver. So I'm not quite sure who's in the pipeline in the center position to overtake Jared Stoll, and maybe just Jared Stoll's here for the rest of his career.
To fight with chemistry, I mean, this chemistry is what the Kings are about. I mean, they're not the most talented team in the league, but they're the best playoff team in the league, and it's chemistry. I mean, it's all chemistry.
And if you look at the regular season, it wasn't a great regular season. I mean, Jonathan Quick's numbers were pretty awful during the regular season. But I think that this year going forward, the big concern and question is in the last 2 years you lost Scuderi and now you lost Mitchell. Right. And I think to ask Robin Regehr and this kid McNabb, who's probably going to grab a spot, to take over for that's a huge loss. Mitchell, the little things Mitchell did, just the positioning alone in the playoffs. If you just watched Mitchell in the playoffs, just look at his positioning and the anticipation that he had on where the puck was going to be was just phenomenal. And that's going to his loss is going to lead to several more goals for the opposition this year. In the regular season and in the playoffs, and my real concern this year going forward for the Kings is going to be injuries.
Yeah.
Because you have a team that's basically played 4 seasons in the last 3.
Yeah.
If you count the number of games. And that's going to take its toll on bodies. I mean, Williams was a China doll before he got to L.A. and has been pretty much healthy for a few seasons. So is that luck going to run out? Marian Gaborik is always hurt. Knock on wood, Kopitar has been healthy.
And Kopitar is coming up too. That's another one, right? His contract is coming up.
Yeah. I mean, and he's going to be in the prime of his career. And is he going to want to stay and be immortalized by the Kings, or is he going to want $9 million or $10 million or $11 million?
Right. I had this debate with somebody the other day, and I said, "There's no way the Kings are going to give him more than 8 point something." I said, "That's not going to happen."
Well, the thing is, every single team almost every team will back up the Brinks truck to bring that guy in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if Pittsburgh or Washington. I mean, imagine Kopitar, dishing to Ovechkin.
Right.
It's just sick. Every team, Kopitar will be the catalyst to whoever he signs with in winning Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
And so going forward, whether Lombardi is still here or whether Sutter is still here, I think it's gonna depend. I mean, it's right now, he's gonna get his number retired in the rafters, but So it's
Right.
going to be interesting in going forward, because you lose Kopitar, you got no shot.
Well, you lose Kopitar, and essentially you lose Gabrick too. I mean, that's the other thing, because the reason you can justify the Gabrick signing is because of Kopitar.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can always sign wingers. You cannot find big
For sure.
centers. I mean, it's if you're asking Jeff Carter to be the #1 center again, I'm not sure he does the same job that Kopitar did against Joe Thornton and Ryan Getzlaf.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you about. One of my crazy predictions for this year is that Jeff Carter is going to surpass Ryan Getzlaf. Is that possible?
I think if he's healthy, I mean, anything's possible. I think it depends on who his line mates are. I mean, it's like if you're looking at him playing with Dwight King, no.
Right.
I mean, but if you have Tyler Toffoli,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like him and Toffoli could have a great season together.
Yeah, for sure.
So I still think the Kings are a little thin on the left side, and I like Dwight King, but I don't think that Dwight King's I mean, he's an average player. He's okay.
Well, it's almost like you have to be thin somewhere. We were talking yesterday. We had John on from Chicago, and the Blackhawks are thin in the middle. Like they have, I mean, Brad Richards is their second line center, and I question whether or not that's a smart idea or not. Everybody else seems to think it is. I'm not sold. I watched a lot more Brad Richards, I think, than anybody else. So I'm not convinced that he can play with Patrick Kane at this point in his career. So, but so the Kings have that deficiency, but they have. I got in this debate the other day too. One more question, then I'll open up to Matt and Mike and Josh, and I also want to talk about the rest of this conference because I think the conference is amazing. It's just a fun thing to talk about. But I had this debate the other day with Kevin Allen about we were going through the best hockey players of all time, American-born hockey players, and his theory of Mike Modano is still the #1 hockey player of all time, and Chris Chelios is #2 for him. And I think those are all really, and the #1 goalie of all time probably Mike Richter, right? At this point, you have other good. It's all debatable, but I would go with Mike Richter as the number. But I said, what are the odds that before we end this whole thing, Jonathan Quick is the best goalie of all time for the Americans?
I think honestly he probably needs to win another one, another cup. I think he's a product of the system. Like I said, if you look at his regular season numbers, they're not that good. And I think this is the year where Jonathan Quick gets exposed because he's not going to have Willie Mitchell. He's not going to have Rob Scuderi. He's got good players, but he doesn't have those great stay-at-home defensemen unless Lombardi makes a deal before the season starts or 20 games in like he usually does. So I think this year is a real test for him because everybody talks about Chris Osgood won won a couple of cups, but nobody mentions Osgood as a Hall of Famer, do they?
Well, but they had Yzerman and Fedorov and Lindstrom, and they were. I mean, Jonathan Quick has legitimately won them 2 cups.
Playoff wise, and he's insane. I mean, the 2 cup runs. I mean, think about he got lit up like a Christmas tree on against San Jose. I mean,
the rebound to that was amazing for a goal.
Goals and in 2 games, and we're like, oh my God, he's done.
Right.
And him to rebound the way he did and to play the way they did was pretty remarkable.
Well, that was kind of Kevin's point, and Kevin said, I think sort of what you're saying, and that he feels like Quick has, normally we always say with these goalies or any player, you have to say, well, he's a Hall of Famer if he wins the Stanley Cup, and then it's funny because Quick's won 2 Stanley Cups, and now I think people are going to say he's a Hall of Famer if he wins a Vezina.
Wow, he's going to have to.
To be in the Hall of Fame, does he have to win a Vezina? That's interesting. I mean, it's hard to imagine. I mean, if he wins 3 Stanley Cups, he's got to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, you would think so. Yeah,
I think he's a Hall of Famer now if he continues to have an above average NHL career for another 6-7 years. I mean, there are not too many goaltenders out there who've won 2 Stanley Cups, won a Conn Smythe, and been as impressive in the postseason as Jonathan Quick has. At least 3 times, because they got to the conference final the other year. and not gotten into the Hall of Fame. So I mean, I think he's going to make it. It's just a question of, can he stay healthy enough and to be a top echelon goaltender for another 5 or 6 years. Now, Matt, I want to ask you to your point about the defense. I mean, I saw Robin Regehr in Buffalo. He was long in the tooth before the trade, and I think he's going to quickly diminish. The flip side of that, I've always been a fan of Braden McNabb. When he was a young kid getting called up by Buffalo, it was very impressive the first time he played for the Sabres. And then all of a sudden, for like a year and a half, he disappeared. And I talked to somebody who was a broadcaster for the or somebody who was involved with the Rochester Amerks, and asked him how McNabb was playing, and he said he wasn't playing that well. And I said, what happened? Because this guy looked like he was going to be a star, or at least a very good NHL defenseman. And he said he just stopped hitting. If he can go back to being a rough and tumble defenseman, I think that fits better with a bottom pairing role. I think you got yourself an NHL defenseman in Braden McNabb.
Yeah, the thing that Lombardi and Mike Fuda have both said about Braden was his skating needed work.
Yeah.
And I think that he's spent time in Manchester really working on his skating, and he's going to get every opportunity to grab that spot. Mm-hmm. And when Matt Green gets hurt, he'll be the first call up.
Right.
They also have this kid Andrew Bodnarchuk from Boston. They got out of Boston, and he's looking like he might have a legitimate shot this year. But they're not. They're not Mitch. I mean, they have Derek Forbort, the first round pick, and I don't know. He's looking like another Dean Lombardi first round bust. But it's like defense is their strong point. They just don't have that veteran guy. And yeah, Robin Regehr was a pylon before he came over to the Kings, and so he's an even. I mean, if you look at I can't remember the gentleman who wrote the article in San Jose, but he said in that San Jose series they targeted Regehr, and it worked. It's like anytime you get to just blow by him, target him, and it was working, and he got benched.
Yeah, remember
he got benched because of it. So that's a huge
about that at the time too, because remember you were saying, I remember the one text that really got to me when you have some great texts from Matt during games. They're really like great, awesome texts that you send. The one that got to me when I was watching one of the Kings games against the Sharks is you said the Kings have figured out the Sharks. I mean, the Sharks have figured out the Kings. You said the Sharks have figured out the Kings, and you were convinced. That's why you were convinced to sweep. You just said, and how did they figure them out? What was that?
Well, it was one attacking against Regehr. I mean, attack Regehr, attack Matt Green, attack the slower parts. It's hard to get by Doughty, who's been playing 30 minutes a game. But as soon as those guys stepped on the ice, they were flying and scoring. I mean, if you look at all the goals scored against, I mean, during the season I nicknamed Matt Green the Jinx, because if you look at the Kings' record with Matt Green out of the lineup, it was like 27-6. And with Matt Green in the lineup, it was like 21, 20, and 4. It was like something ridiculous. So I nicknamed him the Jinx, and they exploited those guys.
Yeah.
And took advantage very well.
Obviously, the Doug Wilson and the San Jose Sharks think that the secret to beat the LA Kings this season is the addition of John Scott. That's all they did. That's all that they let Dan Boyle go. They moved Brent Burns back to defense, and they added John Scott. It looks like the idea, the idea of Wilson and Todd McClellan is to put out Raffi Torres, Mike Brown, and John Scott and try to beat the crap out of the Kings. I mean, I don't understand. Well, they talked about culture change. They talked about trading Thornton or Marlowe, and we're, 4 weeks away from training camp? Those guys aren't going anywhere, and that's the same damn team.
Here's the interesting thing. The one thing that I honestly believe, especially in the NHL, and that's why I knew we were going to beat the Ducks. The Ducks were a much better team than the Kings the last year. But Bruce Boudreau in the playoffs sucks.
Right.
Let's be real. He sucks. And I think that's the same thing with McClellan. Is McClellan just couldn't get the Sharks over the hump year after year after year, no matter who they're playing. He
Right.
just couldn't get him over the hump, and he was out-coached. Bruce Boudreau was out-coached
Big
by one of the masters, and Sutter took the minimum that he had and got them to play their best.
Right.
And that is just a remarkable coaching job. And I always believe it's the coach. And I think McClellan, and I'm like, great, don't fire McClellan, don't fire him.
right.
You know? Well, not a problem, because he gets out-coached no matter who he plays. Eventually, he's going to get out-coached.
Well, at least Bob Murray had a more effective answer than John Scott. He went out and got Danny Heatley.
Yeah, well, and you know what? And who knows? Well, he traded for Kessler too. You know,
Yeah,
so
I'm joking.
Yeah, Ryan Kessler is a guy. That's going to be an interesting move. But then again, I'm not. I'm again Ryan Kessler.
And they signed Stoner too. Don't forget. I mean, they signed Clayton Stoner. The Ducks have made some great moves. They have Smith Pelly, who's going to come back, and he's going to be banging bodies. Emerson Edom should be symptom-free from his knee injury. Ducks are going to be.
Yeah.
They're going to be flying this year. I mean, they're going to do the same thing they did last year. You know, they run away with the conference most likely.
Right.
And then Bruce Boudreau will choke again.
But then they're going with who's their goalie, you know? I mean, that's the thing about the Ducks. At the end of the day, I mean, if you're going to go in the playoffs, both the Ducks and the Sharks have sort of the same thing hanging over them. They have, goalies who are good and really good, but have, had issues. I'm not going to blame the Emmy for the series last year, but, there's issues there.
There always is going to be, but they have a solid defense. They have great defense, and save for the last game against the Kings, their goaltender was pretty spectacular coming in relief, in those pressure situations. So
yeah, he was for sure, and he's got some good stuff. Now, Rob Blake, I want to talk to you about Rob Blake.
Why?
The greatest thing of all time, right? So surely you're thrilled about this announcement that his number has been retired.
I got to tell you, and I'm very serious about this. I said that if the Kings retire Rob Blake's number, I would very seriously have to think about not showing up to Staples ever again. And I'm very, very serious about it. I know I tend to be a big. Can I say the word pussy on this podcast?
Sure. Why
kitty
not?
cat? Can I say kitty cat?
Sure, go ahead.
But it's very funny because I posted it on my blog, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback from the diehard King fans. If you look at the new King fan, they're like, get over it, just forgive it, move on. And the thing is that I'm loyal to a fault. You should know that more than anybody.
Yeah.
And it's the betrayal that Rob Blake put upon us Kings, our diehard King fans, can never be forgiven. Ripping the sea off your chest, being greedy, and I've documented it ad nauseum, and have spent years interviewing people. I've interviewed McNall. I interviewed Dave Taylor, everybody, Robitaille, everybody who was involved in that. I interviewed and got to the bottom of it because Rob Blake didn't want to. His teammates, Sean O'Donnell, interviewed Nelson Emerson, his best friend, and it was one of those things where Rob Blake was all about Rob Blake.
Yeah.
And Rob Blake didn't give a sugar honey iced tea about the fans, so why should we honor this guy? What did Rob Blake ever do for the Kings? What did he ever do? He came back again, was severely overpaid, $12 million for 2 seasons for an over-the-hill Rob Blake, and he said, I want to come here and help the kids grow, and that was Doughty and Jack Johnson and Voynov. And what does he do? He bolts for San Jose.
Right.
And didn't live up to what he came here for. Then they invite him back, which I don't understand. And it could have been a contract thing. And Robitaille now wants to honor him with his number in the rafters. I am so livid about this because to have him up there and not a guy like Charlie Simmer or Kelly Rudy up there is just freaking blasphemy, in my opinion. You got me going. God darn it! I said I wouldn't get going, and now you got me going again.
Well, I know I only had to say Rob Blake, but
Oh.
we brought up the whole thing about just in general about when a player, leaves a team like that and then gets, his number retiring to me is above the Hall of Fame, right? So it's like it's a different level than the Hall of Fame. It's more important to me than the Hall of Fame, and that is I'm with you. I've been with you, and the tough thing about us in the East Coast is, and Mike brought up this point, which is a really great point, is that we didn't get to see much of Rob Blake's career because that was a dark time sort of for the NHL in the East when we didn't have doubleheader games and all that kind of stuff going on, so we didn't see Rob Blake play very often at all. So we just heard, Rob Blake is a great defenseman, and we would see him play occasionally, and he was obviously a big defenseman and he could play, but we didn't really get to see him day to day.
Look, I'm taking away nothing from Rob Blake, the player, and it's debatable, whether he should be in the Hall of Fame or not. I could make a case for and against. Truth be told, he did more in Colorado than he did for the Kings. He won a cup with Colorado, and he was a dominant defenseman. I mean, he was a Norris Trophy winner with the Kings. So it's like, okay, I'll let the Hall of Fame committee. Because he was an NHL players representative and very much for the players. So I think that's why he got in, because he was very much for the players and rah rah. But to have him honored with his number in the rafters, I can't sit in Staples Center and have out of the corner of my eye number 4 staring at me. It just rubs me the wrong way.
I hear you, Mike.
Matt, from my point of view, from a non-Kings perspective, I look at it from the outside looking in, and I'm like, okay, Blake is, I think, a phenomenal defenseman, multi-time All-Star, as you said, Norris Trophy winner, even though that was with Colorado. To me, it makes sense to retire his number. But then what I do is then I realize, like, if I'm looking at it from like a Leaf perspective, a guy who I have problems with is Matt Sundin, and the Leafs just announced a monument that they're going to build of a number of players outside the Air Canada Center, and I'm sure Sundin is going to be one of the 10 or 11 players they're going to honor. But there's going to be the 3 initial players this year, and if they choose Matt Sundin, who never won a Stanley Cup, who at his last act as a Leaf was to not waive his no-trade clause and allow the team to get something for him after they paid essentially $80 to $90 million over a decade, and they name him over a Dave Keon or a Darryl Sittler or a Boreas Salming or somebody of that nature, that makes me sick as a Leaf fan. So I can understand your feeling of disdain for Rob Blake based on how I feel about Sundin. Even though he's a great player, he's a Hall of Famer, he's deserved of all the accolades, I think a lot of Leaf fans feel like me and feel that Matt Sundin shouldn't be honored like they are probably going to honor him.
I think that's exactly it. And Matt, I think you guys have nailed it. I think you guys have separated the difference between Hall of Fame and retiring numbers, right? Because Hall of Fame is, this guy was an unbelievable hockey player, no question about it. He's one of the best players ever to play. Do you believe in belongs in the Hall of Fame? Retiring a number means what he meant to that team. That means that's what he meant to this particular team. And it also is, there's 2 creepy things here. First of all, building statues to people still alive, I always have an issue with. That's one. I'll throw that out there, Mike. I don't know. Like, if I'm going to build a statue of me, I'm like, whoa, hold on, that's kind of weird, right? So the other thing is, as you pointed out, Matt, too, as well, Rob Blake works for the Kings now, right? So that's the other thing that's kind of has to leave a bad taste in your mouth here. It's just there's a perception there that's not good.
Well, he's assistant GM. I mean, it's. And the GM, I believe, of Manchester. So they've given him a lot of responsibility. They love him. They love his work ethic. And Lombardi praised. He's an inspiration to the young guys. He's always in the gym first and always last out on the ice. Blah blah blah.
Right.
I guess that's where. They're in the business of and I'm just a fan.
Right,
but,
right. But that's
but as a fan, the whole thing. I interviewed a number of fans about this a couple of years ago, and the one thing that they consistently said was, following the post-Gretzky era when everything was miserable, we had one guy to look up to, one guy to carry our franchise that we could, as fans, pin our hopes on, and that was Rob Blake. And so when things were getting good, and he decided, I want to test free agency, which was his right. That was his whole thing. He told Dave Taylor, look, Dave Taylor flew to Minnesota to have one last conversation with Rob, and Rob said, I want to test free agency. And so he said, okay, and then they made the deal for Deadmarsh and Miller and et cetera. And Rob Blake didn't test free agency. He signed a big lucrative contract with Colorado, by the way, for less than the Kings had offered him in the long run, because what very few people fail to realize is that he signed a 5-year deal, but the 5th year was at Colorado's option, which they declined to pick up. So if you actually look at the amount of money that the Kings offered him versus what Colorado paid him, the Kings would have paid him more. So it just further angers Kings fans for what he did. I mean, it's the same thing with Jeremy Roenick. It's like Jeremy Roenick's so loved. It's like, no, he came in here fat and out of shape and took $5 million from us and blamed his skates. So I have no love for Jeremy Roenick, and I have no problem telling him that to his face, which I have.
See, what I like about this, Matt, is this is why I love having you on the air, and I want to say this right now because we get a lot of people from Canada, like Josh, who will be the first who always sit there and say that American hockey fans, especially in markets like Los Angeles or whatever, don't get it and aren't tough on their players and don't feel, you are a Canadian hockey fan living in Toronto. You're an American, but with that Canadian attitude, and this is like what an Edmonton Oiler fan would be saying about an Oiler player, perhaps.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's awesome, and you're right. And so Canadian fans need to realize that these people exist.
Well, I mean, look, you bring up a good point on Edmonton Oiler fans. Is that they've pretty much forgiven Ryan Smith for bolting and going to the Islanders and not coming back and going to Colorado and going to Los Angeles and then finally coming home, and they welcomed him with open arms, and that's I don't know if that's the difference between Edmonton Canadian fans who are quick to forgive.
The thing with that is that when he left the first time, right, he was not he left because he didn't sign a contract, but he left in tears and was traded, and he wanted to be an Edmonton Oiler. So you can blame him for not signing the contract, yes, on the one side, and that's why they had to trade him. But I think the perception is still that the Oilers screwed that up and they should have signed him. And he basically had that city won over. So it was a very different kind of character on that way. So, but I do agree. There's similarities there for sure. So the rest of this conference, real quick before we get going, who's going to make the playoffs? Like, this is my question. Like, I don't see a way that any teams besides the teams that made the playoffs last year, meaning the 5 teams in the Central that made it: Chicago, St. Louis, Minnesota, Colorado, and Dallas, and then the 3 teams from California. I don't see any other team in the West making the playoffs, and I don't think it matters who finishes 1st through 8th in the Western Conference either, for that matter, when it comes down to the games. I mean, it just comes down to matchups, right? Or who do you think makes the playoffs?
You asking me, or are you asking me? Because we haven't heard from Josh in a while, so
I was going to go Josh next.
Yeah, my whole computer can freeze.
Computer issues, so I was afraid that he wasn't working.
Great, I spend an extra $100 a month now on the internet.
That's all right. So
thanks, Rogers, who owns the Leafs. Thanks, guys.
Rogers is just Canadian for Comcast. All right, so Matt,
I got to tell you, I'm a little worried about the Kings. I'll be very honest. I think if there's one team that could, and that's because of the injuries.
Right.
I think that with as many games as these players have played, that injuries are going to take a toll this year. You're going to have that. You're going to have Rafi Torres or John Scott doing something stupid. It's just inevitable.
Right.
And you have Matt Cook in our conference as well. So he'll do something stupid. I think St. Louis runs away with it. I'm not so sure about Colorado. I think they're great, but I think they overachieved, and I'm curious to see what Colorado does. I mean, they have snipers, but I think that defensive teams are going to figure that out, and they didn't really do anything defensively to shore up the defense. And
Yeah.
Is Varlamov going to be Brizgalov? Remember, Brizgalov had such a great year in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Followed it up with a stinker. So I'm curious to see what Colorado does. I'm real interested to see what Winnipeg does this year. I mean, it's under Paul Maurice, I think maybe they'd have an outside shot to make it. I'm not counting out Vancouver this year. I mean, they have a great goaltender. So I'm not I'm not counting out Vancouver either. So it's going to be if the Kings can stay reasonably healthy, then we're fine. But I have a feeling this is the year where the injury bug finally takes its toll. I mean, it's like if one or two of those defensemen are hurt, Voynov or
Right.
Martinez or heaven forbid Doughty, Kings are in a bit of trouble. And I think that for asking Jonathan Quick to carry the load is going to be a tough task this year.
That's for sure. That's been the case, and we have definitely also note that we've enjoyed Ron Hextall quite a bit in Philly. He's been great with the media. He's been awesome so far. He was great. He's been outstanding. He admits that talks are going on, which is new for the Flyers. Like they're trying to. Someone asked the other day about the rumor that I put out there about them going after Bogosian, and he's like, well, yeah, we'll see what happens. And it was that was just to hear that much was crazy from the Flyers. You never hear that kind of stuff. So, and then his reasoning for trading Hartnell, which was a surprising move, but it wasn't surprising when you talk to him about it. It's really where he really convinces you in a second why he would have done that. I mean, you've been around Hexy enough to know that to probably see what I'm saying there.
Well, it's a culture change.
Right.
I mean, it's what Lombardi built here. The first thing he did was get rid of Sean Avery. He got rid of all the naysayers and all Armstrong and all the guys that were negative influence. I'm not saying that Hartnell was a negative influence, but you have to build a certain culture and again, Hextall was under 4 or 5 years under Lombardi, so he's been taught well.
Yeah.
Building from the back out and getting those guys in the room to grow with each other. And I think if you look at at Couture and Reed and all those other young guys, Shen, all growing up together, that's the culture. I love Philadelphia this year. I tell you, I went Rodney Dangerfield just like I tell you.
Yeah. There's Mason. If they can get if Mason's as good as he was last year, they're a real challenge for everybody else. If he's not, it's a goaltending thing for them, I think. But I'm with you. They have the right players, and the one thing he's talked about though that he brought from LA for sure, and that the Flyers haven't had for the last couple coaches, or necessarily the last couple decades, is a system. He's like the Kings have a system, and Hexy's like Hartnell doesn't fit that system, and that's basically what it comes down to. And he's like, can you imagine? One of my friends said it really well. He said, can you imagine Hartnell playing for the LA Kings? In the way we just saw them play in the playoffs, and the answer is probably no. Like he's a kind of player who runs around like a chicken without his head out there, and isn't on the near boards to get that outlet pass that the Kings would always do to make the clear.
Well, and again, don't you find it interesting that a pure goal scorer like Matt Molson hardly had any offers, and winds up, I'm glad he signed back in Buffalo, yeah. But I find that very curious as to, why does he just not play in a certain system? Or is he just one of those freestyle, players?
No, it's because has limited speed. He's a good, effective forward, but he does not have top end skating ability, and he fit in well with Tavares. Basically Tavares was a creator, and Molson stood at the side of the net and waited for Tavares to get him the puck. He did the same thing in Buffalo for a time, and did the same thing for Minnesota. I know Toronto made him an offer, and he's from the Toronto area, but he ended up deciding to come back to Buffalo because he'll get first line minutes with Buffalo, and in spite of the fact that Buffalo will probably finish 29th or 30th in the league when they do draft Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel next year, then he'll have a center to play for. Right. So and he got $5 million from the Sabres. So I mean that's the reason why. The funny thing is that. Scott Hartnell is maybe not a system player, but he's going to a system team in Columbus. Columbus is in a way, a system team, a defensive system. And if that's the
Yeah,
case,
no, that's going to be an issue, I think. Although the thing that Arnold, what he brings to Columbus, they need more than this. They're at the point where they need a guy like him to not just go out there and score goals in the power play, but he's a Penguins killer, and he also is the kind of guy with the community. They need in the community. He's a real personality. So Hartnell brings a lot to Columbus. More.
Well, with Horton coming back too, I like Columbus this year.
Oh yeah, Columbus is a playoff team. I don't think there's any question in my mind. They could very well win the Metro.
To answer your question from before, and first let Josh get in. Who does he think is the playoff teams in the West?
Playoff teams in the West. Let's see. I mean, the Ducks are going to make it for sure. The Kings are going to make it. Sharks will make it. The Blues, the Blackhawks. I still think the Avalanche will be there. So what am I? 3, 4, 5, 6. Dallas will be there. 7.
That leaves Minnesota, Nashville, Winnipeg.
Yeah. It's either Minnesota or Vancouver.
No.
Oof. I'm gonna say the Wild.
Yes.
Vancouver doesn't make the playoffs.
Okay, here's the only area where I think there's a possibility. I mean, I think 7 of the 8 that Josh mentioned. The only one that I'm a little worried about is Minnesota with their goaltending situation, because we still don't know about Harding. We still don't know about Backstrom.
Well, how about the Canucks goaltending situation too, Mike? I mean, Eddie Lack is. I don't think
Brian
he's
Miller.
Brian Miller.
Oh, that's right.
I mean,
oh my God, I'm an idiot.
that's all right.
Vancouver gets in, not Minnesota.
But and the question is, like with Anaheim, whether they're going to go full with Frederick Anderson or they're going to bring Gibson in as a 21-year-old. I personally think they're going to put Gibson down in the AHL for half the season and let him play and get a little more experience and let Anderson play.
I do. I really think from everything I've heard, they're going to go with Gibson. Talking to people.
But the team that could be in trouble with the goaltending problems is Minnesota, and if that happens, and I think I like the addition of Vanek. I'm probably the only person out there who does, but I like the addition of Vanek, and I think they're a good defensive team, and maybe they can cover up their goaltending problems if they have to go with one of those 3. But Phoenix has an outside shot because of Tippett playing in the defensive system. If Mike Smith steps up as a goaltender, now you got Sam Gagner probably joining a group of forwards that are not terrible, and they play a very tight checking game, and they've been in the race over the last few years, and they've gotten to a conference final. So
well, yeah, and the crazy thing about that, I agree with you, Mike. But this is the thing we're talking about. Okay, when you talk about Minnesota, let's do Minnesota, Vancouver, Phoenix.
I think Vancouver's not. There's not a chance. I think
they've got a shot. This is their last year that they're going to the playoffs for a while, maybe, but they've got a shot. So, but all of those teams would easily make it in the East. All of them.
Oh, sure.
So all the teams we're talking about there are playoff teams in the East. So.
Well, what if Jake Allen flops in St. Louis? You're going to rely on.
Question, right?
Then Doug Armstrong has the Marty Berdeur's agent on speed dial.
Well, which could be Minnesota too. I mean that's the other thing. I could see that in Minnesota as well. I mean Marty Brodeur is playing this the right way because there is going to be a team that's a really good team that's going to need a goalie at some point, and he knows that. So I think that's what he's doing, and he's sitting back and waiting because, as they tried, I heard the other day that New Jersey tried one more time to bring him back as a possible backup, but that's not going to happen. He knows there's a good team out there for him. So that's going to be really good. That's all the time we have for this show. But sorry, Josh, for some of the technical stuff there. But Matt, it was awesome having you on board.
Great being back, man. Great to see you guys again.
Great to talk hockey in the middle of August. Awesome. We'll be back tomorrow on Friday. We may be talking Islanders tomorrow. We're trying to work that out with our Islanders guy. If you're in the chat room and hanging out, we're going to be doing another show in 20 minutes that'll air next week officially. But if you're in the chat room, I'll send the link up there so you guys can watch it being recorded live. But then if you want to actually watch it, it'll be next week. And we're going to be joined by a kind of cool guest next hour. So thanks again. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you soon.